I'm glad you mentioned vivid visual things, because I'm about to show you one. But the reason for showing you this is to show you that I can be stupid, very stupid. I'm going to give you some genuine questions that I have about education and tell you what I think about them. But first of all, the story of this picture you're about to see. I wrote a book called Inequality in the 1%, which was published last year. In January, the publisher said it's selling well. We need a new cover for the second edition, which will come out in September. And they showed me a particular cover, and I said, there's absolutely no way I will agree to you using this cover in September. And that was the cover. The second edition was published a day after Lord Ashcroft's revelations. If I had said yes, I would be in the 1%. The sales. But it is relevant to my first question. I've got 4 questions, and they're genuine questions. The first is a more expensive education really a more privileged education? Now, this is a nuance of words, I think. I've gone on for the last year about the word potential. I think the word potential was a useful word in education, the idea of bringing up every child to their potential, and then became a very damaging word because you can begin to say lots of children haven't got great potential, so this is all we can do with them. Now, the word privilege has been used in the last 10 years in terms of know your privilege, understand your privilege. I'm a middle-class white man. I have deliberately eaten more food than average so that I'm also not slim. You know, but other than that, I'm in your privilege category and I need to know my privileges. And I constantly hear people say, I know I had a privileged education. And I think, how do you know? Because none of us get to go through education twice. Some of us may have part of our education in a cheap system and part of it in an expensive system, but that is not the same as running our life twice. Where I think this phrase comes from, I know I was privileged, I was lucky enough to get a privileged education, comes from way back when we had secondary moderns, and the vast majority of children went to secondary modern, and you were condemned to a life of labour. I've met 3 academics in the last 20 years who've been to secondary moderns. You just didn't get out of the class that you were in or put in. Unless you pass the 11 plus, and then you're with those people, or your parents could afford to pay for you not to be there. So I think that's where the phrase comes from. But I do think it's possibly a mistake, and part of our big problem in the British education system is people saying, I know I was privileged to receive a good education. Because I'm not sure you can be sure it was actually, since we got rid of almost all the secondary moderns, that great. Now, I could go on about boarding schools, but you'll all know about boarding schools. The only thing I need to say about boarding schools is that I'm willing to bet any of you that when I retire, we'll be reading stories about people saying how bad it was to be in a boarding school now at the age of 9 or 10. There are still a few kids in boarding schools at those ages. But it's not just boarding schools. Let's say I went to a day school in Oxford. I went to Magdalen College School. My parents made some sacrifices, all this kind of language to send me there. We didn't have quite as expensive holidays in the summer that we might have had. And I got to wear a uniform, which was a bit stiff. And I had to cycle past all the children on the street who didn't go to Magdalen College School. And when I got there, teachers were very attentive, very good teachers. But it was very important that I work hard and get the grades at what I'm supposed to do and play sport, because that's important too. And I went on and I achieved and I got to university, but that was a bit of a shock because things were a bit different at university. People didn't give me as much attention. I got a 2-2 and it wasn't as great. But then, through some contacts I had later, I managed to get a fairly good job and I've worked my way up and I'm now in a senior position in university. Whenever we talk about education, I say, but I know I was privileged. I was lucky, it was a really good school. how do I know that actually it was better or not better for me? If I had been born anywhere else in Western Europe, I would just have gone, there are differences and there are divisions, but I wouldn't have put on that stiff uniform and I wouldn't have been so separated. And certainly my parents would almost never be making a sacrifice to send me there. And they wouldn't be the customer. The customer is the person who pays. It would be about the child. And so I think we need to tell people who say, I know I had a privileged education, talk about all your other privileges, but don't necessarily assume that that was a privilege that happened to you. It's a genuine question. I'm not sure about that, which is why I'm throwing it open to you. The second one. Have you learnt a great deal if you were awarded many A stars? Now, this isn't really a question for anybody in my age or older, because none of us did, because there were no A stars. I don't think we feel inferior because there were no A stars, but A stars have come in, no doubt we're going to get A double stars. You're very likely to think you've learnt a lot, because there aren't many teachers who go around saying, you know, actually what you did was you conformed really, really well. We told you what to do, you read the syllabuses, you practiced again and again at the kind of questions you had to do, and then you performed like a very well-trained dog going through hoops at exactly the right time on the right day. They don't tend to say that to you. They tend to say you're a credit to the school. You know, we are what we want, if only everybody could be like you. But I do think we should start worrying about this, not least because my children come home from school at the age of 7, telling me about whether they're a 5B or a 6A and all these numbers that they've got and they're given. And I do wonder whether it gives you a false sense of thinking you've actually learned something. You know, how good is it to a dog learning how to jump through hoops? Does it really help the dog? Does it help later on in what you do? Thirdly, are we still, or are we increasingly valuing memorizing over problem solving and experimentation and imagination? And are we reverting to the idea that knowledge and memorizing is really important? It was very important at the time of the 11 plus. You really did need to memorize things to do well at all of the 11 plus. And so we ended up with a cohort of boys and a few girls. We had fewer schools for girls, so we made the 11 plus harder for them, who were very good at remembering things. They may not have been so good at other things. They may not have been imaginative as other children. I do worry, and I often hear people talk about the need for knowledge, and often the knowledge is strange knowledge. Nobody teaches our children in Britain about the Opium Wars. Hardly anybody. You know, why do you think China went from being one of the richest countries in the world to one of the poorest? It's because we forced them to buy the heroin and the other opiates that we were producing in India. There's lots of our history that we don't teach. We then seem to have an obsession with a particular family and learning this family and when they became kings and queens. That apparently is useful knowledge to have. We end up telling people to get over slavery, which, you know, may not be the cleverest thing to have said, but it's not your fault if your education never told you that wasn't a clever thing to say. So I do worry that we have an overemphasis on this. I mean, my cynical view about it is, if you think about University Challenge, where you need knowledge and memorizing, at any one time there can only be 8 young people on the screen at University Challenge. How many University Challenge champions do we need to produce to keep that programme going on the BBC? And yet, we have this idea that somehow being able to recognise a piece of classical music or know your periodic table well enough will do the rest. If you can train somebody to do University Challenge, there are people who do it, that this is going to make the country great again. And it's there, and it's really, it's my life. Oxford and Cambridge colleges get very happy when they do well at University Challenge. So, remember my children getting the 6As and the 5Cs and so on. We now examine children every year. The first year of baseline testing is happening now. happening last week. You noticed the 5-year-olds are having their baseline tests. One of the baseline tests is, can you recognise the arches of the McDonald's logo? And if you can, you're slightly higher up the baseline. Whereas if you're a terrible child who's come from a family who's never taken you to McDonald's, you're lower, which is good, because then the school looks better later on, because it can have more value added. Anyway, we're the only country in the world that does this, that tests from the age. Other countries don't even send children to school at this age. We're testing and testing and testing and testing. I think it'll be very hard to wean ourselves off this. I think we've got addicted to tests. But I don't think they are wonderful things. Let me ask you about your test. We heard from Diane that, let's assume none of you had free school meals. So 62% get 5 A to C's, whatever it was. So 38% didn't. So I want to ask you about your maths, and there's a reason. I'm going to show you 2 graphs and shut up. And this first question requires a bit of honesty from you. If on your first attempt you didn't get a C or the equivalent of a C, could you put your hands up if you failed maths? Great. We've got, oh, I didn't know. Excellent. 5, 6, that's great. Not 38% of the audience, I'm afraid. So you're not even representative of the people who don't get free school meals. But that's kind of understandable. OK, who got a C at maths? A few more. Who got a B at maths? Quite a few more. Feeling a bit superior now? Who got an A? Good. Who got an A star? There we go. It's the youngsters. Yeah. OK, it's youngsters. Well done. Now, here's the kind of good news about this for all of you. None of you are that good at maths. This is the average score. I don't particularly like these international league tables. I'm beginning to like them more because they're beginning to show lots of correlations. But they're very dodgy for things that are hard to compare between countries, like literacy. But they're not bad for maths. It's not that hard to do a basic maths test of people at 15 and compare how they do. And here you'll see a rough relationship between inequality. As that number goes up, it's the ratio of the best off tenth's income to the worst off tenth. It's massive because the 1% gets so much. You know, so it's, in our country, it's about 17. The best off tenth gets 17 times more income a year, largely because of the 1% getting so much. But if you look in general, the more inequality in your country, the worse is the average maths score at 15, and the less inequality, they do better in Japan and a bit better in Sweden and the US and so on. It's not that strong. They do very well in Singapore, despite being a very unequal country. But, and here's the crux of it, and this is why your maths grade really doesn't matter. That's at age 15, 16. That's when they do the test. This is the highest we can get ourselves up to on the test. Now look what they find. This is the latest data from OECD. If we give you a maths test a little bit later, age 16 to 24, everything suddenly lines up really well. In the most unequal countries of the world, of the rich world, that we're doing worse at maths. We're absolutely appalling. And in the more equal countries, they're doing really well because they actually learnt maths, right? And they didn't get an B or an A star. They learnt maths. And my cynical worry, but it's a real worry, is I think we're getting to a point in Britain where our education system, including our university education system, is not about learning and experimenting and growing in confidence so that you can actually do more interesting things later with what you have. Increasingly, it's about pushing every child to get the maximum test scores they can at that point at which your school or university is to be graded. So you look really good on the day. But if you then ask people in the country to do something which requires a bit of imagination, something new, and being able to cope with the ideas of moving numbers around your head and algebra and other things, well, that was a thing you really hated at school because they made you learn it in a particular way to get the A, not to actually enjoy it. And if that is going on, if that's what's actually happening in this country, yeah, the only thing that will save us is mass immigration from the rest of Europe. Thank you very much.